A second letter in December stating that they were trying to make this go back into 2006
I would
for
imagine.
earned credits, which we never had a say in anything.
So he's been a good
He's
boy.
already been, yeah, he's been a good boy now. Yeah.
Does that make it better?
No, it's not going to bring my daughter back. It's not going to bring my daughter back.
What do you hope to accomplish here?
I would like to see the whole thing repealed, to be honest with you. I don't know if we can, but definitely the retroactive part.
When the prosecution team said to us, it's 27 and a half years with no chance for parole, they didn't say maybe.
Right.
When Judge Patrick Carroll sentenced him to 27 and a half years, he stood up and told me he was going to go to jail for 7 and a half years with no chance for parole. He didn't say maybe. I'm not maybe going to get my daughter back. I'm not maybe, my son's not maybe going to have his big sister back. My 2 grandchildren are never going to have their mother who loved them dearly back. As far as I'm concerned, our sentence is a life sentence. We have to live with this every day.
Did you even think for a crime like this could be done?
I don't understand why the rules change. If they want to make new rules going forward, that's one thing. But this conviction
Right.
was in 1990.
Right.
Can I see the letter again? I
Yes.
just want to shoot it.
Thank you.
And we were told that this would stick. That's what we were told.
Right.
And as it was, we had a plea bargain. We wanted more time. We felt he deserved more time. I wanted life. And the only way we could have gone for more time was to
27
have
and a half is
had,
what, he was how old at
It
the
was-
time? He was in his 20s?
he was 27.
Oh, 37.
They did 20 years for him, 7.5 years for the boys. The boys were at
Risk of
home.
injury for
It is believed the oldest boy, he was 4 years old, witnessed the strangulation.
And is your fear, I mean, not only is he going to get out, but he's going to still be a relatively young man and
Yes.
offend again?
Yes. Oh, yes. I have statements from him before she was murdered. He has many issues.
So a lot of
threatening
domestic,
me.
it was just like a domestic
Yes.
violence.
Yes. But as I was saying, we had a chance to go for more time.
to go through a trial.
To go through a trial.
So it's a plea deal?
Yes, and the only reason we did it is because they told us our youngest grandson would have to be put
So
on
you
trial.
agreed to the plea deal because
Yes.
And there was no
27
way
and a half, and that
we could
seems
do it.
adequate.
So-
had you known if it was less,
Right,
you would not have
I
agreed.
settled for that because they promised me that's how long he was going to stay in for.
That's
They
the thing.
promised me.
We were promised. It wasn't a maybe.
So you would have gone to trial had you
I would have gone to trial had I known he was getting out any earlier. This is what we were told.
I'm
then they
surprised
told
they
us,
told you that a 4-year-old.
that's what they told me it
They
would
had
come
enough
to.
evidence.
They told me that's what it would come to.
And you didn't want to do that?
No.
No, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that.
Good luck to you.
And I
Thank
would like
you.
to say that
Thank
the
you.
prosecution and was fantastic to us, and as well as victim advocates.
Now, what was that out of? Is that out of
That was
Litchfield?
Danbury.
Danbury.
That trial was.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Can I ask, I don't want to sit miles away from any of you. If you guys don't mind gathering a little bit closer, otherwise I'm going to feel lonely if I sit up here all by myself. And there's plenty of rooms for everyone. There's plenty, please, pull up a seat at the, unless you're fearful for your safety for any reason, in which case we obviously respect that 1,000%. Okay. And I'm not pressuring anyone to move forward. I just didn't want to. My job in government is always to try to narrow the distance between elected officials and the people we serve, not to broaden the distance. Yeah. And I should first introduce myself. My name is Andrew Roraback. I'm a state senator from Litchfield County up in the northwest corner of the state. I'm in my 12th year in the state senate. And I'm told that this proceeding may be recorded. There may be an audio tape going. I know this is Jeff Chase, the person with the camera works for the Democratic State Central Committee. His job is to videotape me everywhere I go to try to catch me saying something unwise. So don't worry about him. first thing I'd like to do is to thank everybody for coming here on such short notice. When the legislature passed this bill last May, and I'm going to ask, Jack, do you mind shutting the door, please? When the legislature passed the early release bill last May, on the floor of the state Senate, I got up and said, wait a minute, didn't we pass a truth in sentencing bill? I've been in the legislature for 18 years. When I first came here in 1995, the public was very disturbed that people would be sentenced, violent criminals would be sentenced to long sentences and would get out after serving less than half their sentence, or you name it. And people were saying, what's up with that? So the legislature back then passed a bill called Truth in Sentencing, which required violent offenders to serve a minimum of 85% of their time, and nonviolent offenders to serve a minimum of 50% of their time. So when the early release program came up in the Senate in May, I said, wait a second, haven't we made promises to crime victims and their families that the criminals, the convicts, will serve a minimum amount of time? And if this bill passes, and it's retroactive 5 years, won't it have the effect of breaking the promises that we've made to crime victims and their families? And so all of you, first of all, by a show of hands, and again, I don't want anyone to compromise their security, but by a show of hands, could you raise your hand if you yourself were a victim of crime, and if you were a victim of what we call a violent crime, and or if you're the family member of someone who was a victim of crime, and wasn't a violent crime. Okay, and what I'd like to do, we have about 45 minutes. Selfishly, I've asked you here today to give me a factual basis, a real life illustration of why it is that the legislature should repeal what I believe was an ill-conceived initiative. And you know better than me, because you're living it every day. So, in the time that we have available, I wanted to hear your stories and first ask you to identify yourselves, tell me where you're from, and then we'll go around and I'll ask everyone to take 2 or 3 minutes to tell me the particulars of your situation to the extent that you're comfortable sharing that with me, and then we can talk about how to go about trying to get this law repealed. So, starting, and I'm taking it that everyone who's sitting back there doesn't wish to identify themselves, prefers not to identify themselves. And so we'll start with people who don't mind identifying themselves. And I'll start to the woman to your left.
This is my wife, Lee DeGrosse. My name is Patrick DeGrosse. We're from New Fairfield, Connecticut. Our situation involves...
And I'm going to ask you to, if you can press, there's a button in front of you that will turn on a light that will activate your mic. And I was remiss, I want to thank, let me first thank Michelle Cruz, who is the victim advocate,
Yes.
and Merritt LaJoy. The Office of the Victim Advocate was created by the legislature because victims did not have a voice in the process. And I want to thank them for giving you that voice in the process.
And they have.
And I want to thank them for helping me to invite you here today, because without them, you went to them, they heard what you had to say, they knew that this was not a faceless problem, this is a real problem, and you're here because of their help. So I thank you, Michelle, thank you, Merritt. So please.
With the microphone on.
There we go.
My name is Patrick DeGrosse. This is my wife, Lee DeGrosse. Our situation involves the murder of our daughter. We agreed to a plea bargain back in 1998. He was convicted. He agreed to terms. And we were told that he would be in jail for 27 and a half years. Then we started receiving notices about, I guess what you would call good time behavior, early release. When Kevin Black and the prosecution team in Danbury told us it was 27 and a half years without any chance of parole, they didn't say maybe, they said it would be 27 and a half years time served.
That was the 80, and I don't mean to interrupt, but just so I understand, that would be the 85% of the, was it a 35-year sentence and 27 and a
I
half?
don't know that part of it.
Okay, fair enough, but they told you.
27 and a half years with no chance for parole.
Done.
When Judge Patrick Carroll sentenced him, he basically said the same thing in that courtroom, that he would serve 27 and a half years with no chance for parole. Now, I assume that no chance for parole means you come out 27 and a half years later.
I think that's a reasonable assumption.
I would consider that to be. And he didn't say maybe. I can tell you this, my daughter is not maybe coming back. My son is not maybe gonna have his sister back to live his life when we're gone, we're old with. My grandsons are never gonna have the mother that loved them dearly. That's not gonna happen. It's not a maybe for us. Our sentence is a life sentence.
And Patrick, what do you understand the effect of this early release program to be on the promise that was made to you by the judge? Did you have a victim advocate involved at the time as well?
At that time, we did, yes. And as I said, they were very helpful to us
And is it fair
through
to say,
that period.
is it fair to say that the prosecutor, the judge, and the victim advocate all promised you that this individual would be incarcerated for a minimum of 27 and a half years?
That is correct.
And what do you understand the effect of this bill to be on his or her sentence?
Well, it sounds like that every month of good behavior, you get 5 days off.
And has anyone told you, have you asked the question, how that translates to his 27 and a half year sentence?
I haven't been able to ask anybody about that. Directly.
We've only received 2
We've
letters.
received 2 notices that, and it shows the term decreasing every time we receive a new one. The last letter we received, unfortunately, a couple of days before Christmas.
You know, it was an agonizing decision when we were in court as it was, because there were 2 children involved. The older child probably saw his mother being strangled. And we were told by the court, by the prosecutor, that we could try to go for more time, but we ran the risk of our grandchild being put up on the stand, and we couldn't do it. We could not do that to him. So as it was, we had to, it was a horrible decision. We had to say, all right, we'll go for the 20 years for him, 7.5 years for the kid, but they guaranteed us he would not come out before 27.5 years.
And was he convicted of 2 separate crimes?
Yes.
Yes, the children were at home. He murdered her in the house. The oldest one is believed to have seen it, from what we were told after, by him. He drove her over the state line, led us to believe he was somewhere else, left her in a field for 3 days, until we finally found her. And this man wants to get off a little earlier because now he's sorry.
Well, and the reason I asked the question, I want to make sure we have time to get there. When I asked the question because I don't believe the early release applies to murder.
There's 2 charges.
But if there's a separate charge that he's serving 7.5 years,
Okay.
The charge was reduced
Our
from
letter
murder,
states it.
from murder to manslaughter.
Okay.
So there's the problem.
there is the problem.
Right, which is part of the plea bargain.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure that we're on
So I
a solid
understand
ground.
that murder
But
is not included in this, there's 6.
correct. But in the context of the plea bargain, what I'm sure mattered to you was how long he would be going
Correct.
away for. And now that promise has been kept. And we're going to pass around a sheet of paper. I'm going to ask you to put your email addresses, and I know that Michelle and Mary probably have them, but for the purposes of my office, as we continue to advocate on this issue, I want to make sure that you're reachable. So thank you, Patrick. And your wife's name?
Lee.
Lee.
L-E-E?
L-E-E.
Thank you. And Next. Again, if you don't mind identifying yourself.
My name's Laura Gilmartin, and I was the victim of a 3-day crime where a man actually entered my house while I was away for 3 days, destroyed the house, erased me from that house that I'd lived in for 8 years. And I object to this earned credit time because I feel that these criminals already get a great deal when they plea bargain. They don't, most of the cases in Connecticut, I'm sure the Victim Advocate's Office will tell you, don't go to trial. So they already get this great deal. All they have to do is just admit they did what they did, and right away, half their time is cut then. Also, as I heard me speaking, when they make these plea bargains, their crimes are reduced. This went to manslaughter. When they get to jail, after they've made these deals, half of these crimes get erased. A year after this man did this to me, he hired someone while incarcerated in Gardner Institution in Newtown. He hired someone to kill me and my 3 daughters. The man was arrested with maps, a map of my house, a diagram, everything. Money changed hands. And when I went to the parole hearing in February, the parole board had no knowledge of any of it. None. So, what I'm saying is, the victim gets one gift. The victim gets to speak at all the court proceedings. The criminal gets 2 great deals with this plan. They get half their charges erased, nolly, because they've admitted to what they've done. And they get another great deal when they get there. They can start knocking off how much on each year. It's just really not fair. And that statute that allows the victim to speak also allows the victim to speak at the parole hearings, which I've done. But if someone's automatically going to get their time reduced, what's the point of a victim going up to Enfield and speaking to the parole board if it kind of renders the statute useless.
And how long was your criminal sentence?
They wanted to plead him out. He would have probably not done more than 3 months or so. But I fought, and he did. I fought for 2 years, and he did wind up getting 10, suspended after 5. Only because I fought. But what happens to the victim that isn't politically savvy enough to read the statute? No, they can be there. No, they can be there, and no, they can speak. Or has transportation to Lafayette Street, or has a job that they can constantly keep leaving to go while he's working out the best deal he can possibly work out. That's what we get. We get the opportunity to speak. They get 2 pretty good deals.
Thank you for being here.
Senator. If you don't mind, I actually kind of put some words on paper just because I'm not sure I'll be able to articulate without getting too nervous. But,
Absolutely. Thank you.
my name is Mary Ann Heffernan, and I'm here with my husband Michael today. Senator Roraback, thank you for taking time to listen. This summer will mark the 28th year of my life without my sister Joyce. That number is stunning to me because at the time of her death, on August 3rd, 1984, you couldn't have convinced me that I would be able to live my life without her. And what I'm hearing already today is the issue at hand is a matter of trust in our system, a matter of justice, and a matter of confidence in our system, which any victim's family member will tell you we're always told to have. Joyce was my only sister. She was one of 7 children in our family and a twin. In 1984, Joyce Stockman was a 19-year-old college student preparing for a career as a veterinarian, a goal she set as a little girl and never wavered from. She had just graduated from Becker Junior College with her associate's degree and was registered to go on to Southern Connecticut State University for 2 more years before vet school. Obviously, she was much more than that. Sister, daughter, friend. We all know the titles people have in life. Beyond being my sister, Joyce was my best friend, and the hole left in my life since she was brutally murdered by a stranger will never be filled. Ever since my sister became a statistic in the state's judicial system, my family was told to believe in the system, that justice would prevail. I'm here today because, again, it seems that the system is paying more attention to its criminals and not considering the victims created through their horrendous acts. My sister Joyce was grabbed by a stranger, David Weinberg, as she walked along a quiet road. She was beaten about the face until she was unconscious, thrown into the trunk of a car, driven to a remote location where she ultimately tried to run for her life. She was stabbed 18 times and left for dead in the cold waters of Lake Shore. Her body was found 4 days later, and Joyce had to be identified by use of her dental records. Like so many murder cases, our case was complicated. It took 9 months for an arrest to be made. Our family waited for justice. David Weinberg was arrested on a Friday in May 1985, arraigned the following Monday, and released on bond. Our family waited for justice. A probable cause hearing was the next judicial step. That took 4 months to take place because the defendant is allowed his right to the counsel of his choosing. His lawyer was too busy, the court calendar was crowded, our family waited for justice. Probable cause hearing took place in September 1985. Probable cause was found, and again, the judicial system moved slowly. For a number of reasons, the case didn't go to trial till the fall of 1988. After a grueling trial, a jury convicted David Weinberg of murder in November 1988, just before Thanksgiving, with a sentencing date of January 6, 1989. At the time, convicted murderers in Connecticut were allowed to post bond, so David Weinberg celebrated the holidays at home with his family, while my family again waited for justice. He was sentenced to life on January 6, 1989. Again, a short time later, he posted bond and was free while his case went to the state appellate court and later the state Supreme Court. Both courts upheld the conviction, and eventually and finally, David Weinberg went to prison. So many opportunities for a violent criminal to be free in our system. As a family member who lost someone so precious in my life, this was appalling. The reason we are all here today brings back that same appalling feeling. It is beyond appalling, it is disgusting. Why does it feel like, again, my family is waiting for justice? The bill passed last year with what I understand was no opportunity for public discussion, was an effort by the legislature to follow a model that many other states have. Apparently, it was more important for Connecticut to join the national mainstream than consider what the public, those people who elect our politicians to represent us, may want. This sounds like politics to me. What it doesn't sound like is justice. David Weinberg was given a life sentence, 25 years to 60 years. That was the beginning of his punishment, which now has the potential to be less, according to the way things are working, less than what a judge and jury determined to be appropriate for his despicable actions. The bill passed last year does not affect our case yet. But if a bill can be passed so quietly without an opportunity for the public to speak, what's next? For our family, our punishment began on the night of August 3rd, 1984, when David Weinberg killed my sister. The life sentence for my family began then, with no good time credits, no risk reduction credits. I'm here to stand up for what I feel is another incident of victimization of every family that has lost a loved one due to a violent crime. I want to know how the state can decide to alter justice rendered by the system that we are told to support and believe in. Really, what's next? Why must victims' families monitor justice? Thank you for taking up this issue, and I hope you will carry all of our voices back to the legislature and right this wrong that has been inflicted upon victims' families in the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and I would be very pleased if you could leave a copy of what you read with our staff. Thank you. Yes, sir.
These efforts from Stratford, another late LE. We all have life sentences. We do not get early release or time off from good behavior. We're all victims here. I was assaulted by a drunk driver in a coma for 7 weeks and hospitalized for 89 days. Why I'm alive today was only modern medicine. I still have many difficulties, and my family has many difficulties because of this. We could all be speakers and write letters, but we're still all penalized. So I also have copies here of what is still wrong with me. I would like to give you later. People today do not get enough for what they did. The laws are for the crooks and beaters. And all of us here suffer every day, unfortunately. Doing nothing that we did, it just happened to us. So the people in prison have no good word for them. They're there for a reason.
And Lee, do you know how long the person who assaulted you was sentenced to?
Yes, I had an attorney working on my case, and they got 15 years suspended after 8 years. And now she's getting 5 days off a month for whatever, save the state money, but I don't get 5 days off a month. I've had 11 eye surgeries, medical bills like you can't believe. This person that assaulted me had no insurance and no assets. This was the 5th time she was arrested for drunk driving. The laws are not fair in this whole country.
And have you been given to understand that she's eligible for good time credits in the sentence she's serving?
Yes, already she's getting 5 days off per month.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Heather Rocco. My daughter was actually a victim. She was a victim of sexual assault. Sorry, very emotional. He got 21 years, possible parole after 11, and I was told through the court system if I plead if I took that plea bargain, my 4-year-old wouldn't have to go in the state. So I chose. Sorry. I was also told I would have the opportunity to go to his parole hearing to speak against his parole. I got a notice that he's getting out in 2 days because of this stuff. So now I have to worry about my children because I have another child. I have to worry about that. I'm trying to get a restraining order. I'm good married. He's gonna leave the state, and because he's got his earned credit, he doesn't have to report here. He doesn't have to stay here. He can flee. And I also have record knowledge that he's going to live in a home with more children in it. So I don't have the opportunity to go to court. I don't have the opportunity to fight this. He's getting out in 2 days. So where does that leave us as a victim?
And when did you expect, at the time he was sentenced, did the judge and the victim advocate and the prosecutor tell you that he would be in for 11 years?
No, 21 years
21
with
years.
possible parole after 10.
And how long has he served now?
He's been in 11 years, 10 years, I'm sorry, 10 years, by the time he got sentenced. And I was told that I got the letter before Christmas, and I called up the OC, and they said, oh, don't worry about it, you have 60 days to fight this, we can go to parole here, we can do all this. I got a letter 2 weeks ago saying he's gonna be released on the 14th. And since then, I've been making phone calls, and I've gotten nowhere. Nowhere. I don't have an option. He's out.
Because of
Because of the sergeant and crook. I didn't have an option to speak as parole board, nothing. You know, and everybody's like, oh, wait, he's a good person. He's a violent person. He's my father. I lived with him in his home. I know his temper. I have been beaten by him. I know what's gonna happen. Do I fear for my life? Yes. May he come after me? I don't know. Will he try to look for me? I don't know. I changed my name, I changed locations, and I still don't know if he's coming after me. And all the court did to me was give me a no contact, so if he calls me, I can call the police. What is that going to do for me? You know? I don't agree with this. Those victims don't have the right to, to speak out, to allow these people to stay in the prison where they belong. You know? They get to walk, he's going to walk free with the only consequences of having to register. That's his only thing he has to do for the rest of his life. And why I have to every day worry about, I have to make sure my kids are safe, make sure he doesn't show up at their schools, make sure he doesn't find out where I am, make sure he doesn't know my last name, where I live now. How is that right for a victim? And this earned release, why? Why should they get earned release time? Why? You can't. They should be in there for their full sentence, period. I don't agree with it. So, I'm sorry, I got very emotional.
No problem. Thank you for being here.
My name is Sam Stovall, and I'm the father-in-law of a victim. I'm also a minister and deal with victims all the time in a counseling setting. And I guess I want to speak on both avenues of that. As the father-in-law, when these kind of things come up, it just sends my daughter-in-law into a tailspin again. There have been multiple threats against her family, since the incarceration by friends of the criminal, by family members of the criminal. And I've sat in now 4 different sessions in court as this person appeals because of this or because of that, and trying to get his sentence overturned and trying to get these different things. He too was released multiple times on bail, and went out and created more victims while released. And as the father-in-law, seeing this person in court who, for one reason or another, is in protective custody the whole time, get rewarded for the fact that they haven't had altercations with other people. They're in protective custody. They can't have altercations with anybody else, so they're rewarded based upon the fact that they do what they are forced to do what they cannot do as far as having altercations. Now he's getting 5 days off per month, 60 days a year off of his sentence. That troubles me greatly. It concerns me, her safety when he gets out. It concerns me the safety of the other girls that were victimized. This person had 27 counts against him, and the safety of these other children who are now young women against him. As a minister and a person who has to deal with the victims all the time and deal with their families and help them through the emotional and mental crisis of these things happening to their child, it is unbelievable to me. I deal with so many dads who bear the guilt and bear the burden of, if I had only been there, I could have protected my daughter, I could have protected this child, I could have protected this person. And I deal with it in many different avenues. It just appalls me that this person, or that people in general, will be rewarded for their activity. Rewarded for the fact that while I was in prison, I cleaned my plate. I did these things. The folks here who have lost people through murder or manslaughter, if we want to dress it up a little bit, as sad as that is, the victim is gone, but the victims today are the families that stay behind, that have to try to live through this, and then to have this thrown in their face. And as you said, the broken promises that when they're put away, they will serve this kind of time, and no regard for the family members, no regard for these victims' families who are left behind to try to do this. And that really bothers me. And as a minister who is who has to extend grace and extend mercy, and I do all of that too, but I also believe that we extend justice. And I don't think in this case justice is being served. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And it's helpful to me if you know the particulars of how long the criminal, what his sentence was, and what the effect of the good time credits will be on his sentence. If you know that information, great. If you don't know it,
I don't know the exact details. I'll render that to the mother of the victim, who
Thank
knows
you.
that better than I do.
fair enough. And she is next.
My name is Dawn Titus, and my daughter was the victim, is the victim. He was sentenced to 20 years. He was supposed, if this had gone to trial, and the only reason it didn't was because her dad, my husband, went to every single court case, didn't miss any of them, had cancer, and right before Scott was sentenced, passed away from the cancer, and as my daughter put it, the worst day of her life was not the rape, it was the day her dad died. And he is a serial rapist, and the rape was so bad that they actually put Trooper 1 up in the air and did an aerial shot because they said it shouldn't have been a rape scene, it should have been a murder scene. And what he did to my daughter, it's still there. I mean, the scars are still there. It was horrendous. It's affected my sons. She's got a twin brother who bears both her brothers bear immense amount of guilt. I do as her mom, because we, as parents, you do think that you should have been there to protect her. It was when her dad was going through chemo. It was just a horrible time, and he took full advantage of her, and the rape, it was brutal. But one worst thing was that she was raped a couple of times with somebody she worked with. But one of the rapes, his mother, she was kidnapped. That was one of the charges. She was kidnapped, so that's a felony. There was 11 felonies just on my daughter, 11. And he kidnapped my daughter from the school parking lot, dragged her by her hair into a car. With the car door still open, he drove off with her. And, sorry. I was so angry because he took her to his parents' house. His parents were computer experts, fixed computers, and he was into pornography, everything, child pornography. And was already apparently under suspicion, and took my daughter into the house, viciously raped her, and his mother, she was screaming for help, and his mother came to the door, opened up the door, and saw what he was doing to my daughter and closed the door. And she was screaming for her to please help her, and she didn't. She just closed the door because her son screamed at her. He had total control over his mother, screamed at her to close the door. And my daughter begged her to please help her, and I went as far as contacting Penny Bakiaki, who's a state representative for me, and I went with her and I testified in front of the Judicial Committee here, in front of all the judges, to change the laws in the state of Connecticut. So that if you witness a crime like that, something will be done, and I've just now learned that we are getting closer, but I've been working on this for years. But when I got the notice, I called up Merritt immediately and lost it on the phone talking to Merritt, just said something's got to get done, this is not right, and just, I told her I've testified in court that I'm trying to change the laws, I'll do anything, this is wrong, and he is in PC because my husband was with the Department of Corrections forever. He was a highly decorated officer. He was also a cop for years, but he's been in PC, not because of my husband, but because there's been death threats against him. He threatened our family. We had to have surveillance cameras on our house because Our house was shot at several times. We had a bomb the night of my husband's wake. We had a bomb thrown in front of our house. The bomb went off in front of our house as my children and I laid in my room on our bed. We were crying after just coming from my husband's wake. A bomb went off in my front yard right outside my bedroom window. So all the cops in my husband's wake was gigantic. We had state representatives there. We had cops. It was gigantic because my husband was very, very well known. And everybody came flying to the house, all these cops, everybody, and they threw a bomb. But we were supposed to be put into protective custody, the witness protection program. She had to sign a paper. She refused because we took care of her. It was me and my sons. And before my husband died, my husband sat out on the front porch every single night, so sick from chemo, every night, with a gun, ready to take out whoever came into that yard to take us out. And after my husband passed away, my sons and I took turns. And if we have to do it again, that's what we'll do. But they did, they took a contract out, and it was proven they took the contract out in our family. And now he's getting, I got 2 letters saying that he's getting 5 days off per month, and I don't know what he's gonna do. We are now in court because he is appealing. Sam and I have to go back to court, I think the 30th, because now he is appealing his conviction and he wants a trial. And the judge even looked at him and almost laughed because the judge said to him, you were sentenced to 20 years because of the appeal. But if you go to trial, all bets are off. And you're now looking at, I think it's 376 years with all the charges. And he just, I don't know what's gonna happen, but this to me is a travesty. I can't see how the state of Connecticut, plain and simple, can be so blatantly stupid to let this pass. That's the only words I can come up with. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but to me, it's just plain stupidity to let this pass. They have in prison, they have free cable. They have all these free things in prison that we have to pay for as citizens. They get handed to them. They have free medical. We have to pay for medical. There are so many people in the state of Connecticut that don't have medical insurance. They get free dental. They get all these things free given to them. They get free glasses. They get all these free things that you and I have to pay for. And yet, he's getting out. He's getting 5 days off of his sentence. And does this go back to when he was in prison waiting for trial? I don't know.
It goes back to 2006, as I understand it. It
But
goes
does
back
it,
5 years.
but does it go before he was sentenced, or does it go from the day he was sentenced?
I don't know the answer to that question.
It goes from the day he sentenced.
Senator, the reason that he got 20 years was that the court-appointed psychiatrist told the family members, if your daughters have to take the stand, the trauma that she had been through would probably cost her her life. We don't think that she could bring that up again. And so they recommended that they take the plea, which is 20 years, out after 11. Now he looks at being out in about 8.5. Which is
And that's
very
really
soon.
what's
With this earned income.
And what's most troubling to me is if the court represented to you and the prosecutor represented to you and the victim advocate represented to you that he would be in for 11 years minimum.
He did.
And now this bill, what the legislature has done, means he could be out after 8.5. I don't think there's any defense the legislature can offer to that breach of faith with.
It's like you're setting aside a sentence without the convict having to make an appeal.
Yeah.
They get the appeal for them.
We were guaranteed, my sons and I were guaranteed in court that if we showed up, and this is before she was married, she didn't even know her husband at the time, we were absolutely guaranteed that if we showed up at DOC for the parole hearing, there was no chance that he would make it out because of all the, we have everything documented. Everything is documented. I mean, it's on film. Everything is documented. They said there's no chance he's going to get out. And then I get this letter, and I didn't even finish reading it. I was on the phone with Meredith.
Thank you, Dawn, for being here. And I don't want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to share their story, and yet we've got to keep an eye on the clock as well, because I think members of the press are going to want to come and learn more in a few minutes. So please.
My name is Joan Fegan, my husband Jack. Our journey began 5 years ago, January 1st. Our son, our oldest boy, we only had 2, was killed by a drunk driver. This was his 4th offense, the DUI. He had been incarcerated at a minimum security place right down the road from where my son lived. And he was let out on good behavior. There was a series of things that happened the week between Christmas and New Year's that I don't understand why he wasn't dragged back into jail. But anyways, he lost control of a truck and hit my son, and my son was killed, was dead at the accident. My son left behind a wife and 5 young children. We've lived this nightmare. We always said we wanted to get through court so we would have closure. There has never been any closure. There will never be any closure. We went to court for 3 years. I sympathize with your stories about years and years. We thought we were there for the duration, but we went to court every time that there was a hearing. His lawyer would just make excuses why it had to be continued, We asked why these things were being continued, and they said, well, when the judge comes up for reappointment, if he doesn't give him this opportunity for a fair trial, he could come back to kick the judge. Fine. So we go on. We even met with the chief state's attorney, whoever it is in the court system that is under the chief state's attorney. And that meeting with him was awful because he was so condescending to us, and it was like, all we wanted to know is what is the holdup with this case? Let's get this. He would not agree that he was guilty. There was another person in the truck with him, and he kept saying that he wasn't the driver, he wasn't the driver. The state police had DNA evidence from the windshield on the driver's side that it was his DNA, but he maintained he was not guilty of this crime. Like I said, we went to court every day. I took time off. My husband took time off. And then one day we got in touch with Merritt. I don't know how. She's like our guardian angel. And she told us so much that was available to us as far as keeping track of him, what we could do if he ever did be found guilty or anything. Our case did not go to court. What happened is, the first time he was brought up, he was presented, we were hoping for a high bail. The judge said, we were hoping for $1 million. The judge there said $4 million. So we felt very comfortable about that. By the time we were finished, 3 years later, okay, he finally decides that he's going to say, yes, he was guilty to this. So this was a plea bargain that had been granted to him 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month prior to this. And no, he didn't want this, he didn't want this. He wasn't the driver, okay? They gave him, so we go into court this last day, and we said to the attorney, we want 20 years, this is the bargain. We don't want any less than 20 years. Otherwise, it's off the table. We want to go to trial. And we know DWI trials, you got to have all your eggs in a basket. Anyways, the judge, we go into court and the judge says, I give you till 1 o'clock this afternoon to take this plea bargain. So we sit there in court out in the hallway for 3 hours waiting to what this, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Of course he's going to take the plea bargain, okay? We go and we try to talk to the judge. The judge wouldn't hear us because we're not allowed contact with him. I had written him a letter. I don't think he ever read the letter. We go back into court, and yes, he agrees that he is going to cop a guilty plea. And the judge tells us then that the agreement was 10 years, suspended after 7, after 8.
It was 15 years reduced to 8.
Reduced to 8. My daughter-in-law at the time had left the state, so she asked if she could please have the sentencing when they got back into the state. She brought her whole family back to the state of Connecticut. We all stood up in front of that judge. This was a new judge, because our judge had retired. This is a new judge, okay? Had never seen us before, had never heard from us before. My triplet granddaughters got up there in tears, pleading with him to up the sentence for this criminal. One of them even called him a murderer, and he went, you know, his body language was ridiculous. My 11-year-old granddaughter got up, and my 15-year-old granddaughter got up. One of his aunts got up, my son's aunts. I got up, my husband got up. This judge had his mind made up, and I don't know if he even ever opened my son's folder. I'm waiting for him to come up for reappointment. I mean, not that I'm gonna serve any bodily harm, but I hope I'm at that hearing. And like you all, I get a letter stating that he's gonna be out on good behavior. He got out on good behavior once before, and he went right back to his old tricks. What's gonna happen now when he gets out? I was only told that he would get out in March of 2013. I don't know how many days credit that he's getting.
And do you know when originally he was scheduled to get out? Do you know?
Well, this happened in 2000. Yeah, at least another 5 years. I would need. As you people said, everything is free. Overcrowding? Oh, that's too bad. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, but you don't have to worry about heating bills. You're heated, your air conditioning, your food, everything is for them. And we still have this nightmare to live through. There will never be any closure, never. This is something that you get up with for the rest of your life. Every day of your life you live this. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for taking interest in us.
Thank you for being here. Michelle, I don't know if you want to do anything. We had promised members of the press that we would brief them at 1:45, but if you want to take a minute to offer your opinion on this process, then we can gather around. And I'm just going to make a brief statement, and we can continue the conversation after that. If you would like to.
I would just like to say, Michelle Cruz from the Office of Victim Advocate, this has been a very frustrating process. Since this bill was passed, we've heard from numerous crime victims in many of your situations where there was a promise made, and yet later on they find out that they get these letters, and these individuals are getting credit for time, good time credit retroactive to April 1st, 2006. And we've been just gathering information, looking at what's been happening in DOC with these offenders. What exactly is this good time credit that they're being afforded for, this risk reduction credit? And for crime victims, you all have a right to be treated with fairness and respect. You all have a right to timely disposition. We were involved in your case. That was not timely. And that's what I keep hearing. It wasn't timely disposition. You waited and waited for justice, and then to have this come, we've just been really frustrated at the Office of Victim Advocate as to how can we help crime victims regarding the risk reduction, because a lot of these offenders, as you've heard, murders, manslaughters, drunk driving, homicides. These are sex assaults. These are serious cases where part of the sentence is a punishment, and part of it's rehabilitation, but part of it is a punishment for the acts. And so, we're just concerned, and we're appreciative of Senator Roraback for bringing this issue up so victims can have a forum to talk about their frustrations. Because at this point, this is the first opportunity they've had to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And what I was going to ask, if you guys don't mind gathering around me, and then I can make a brief statement, and then we'll open up to the press to ask questions of you, if you don't mind. Because I'm going to stand up. Thank you very much. First of all, my thanks to all of these victims of crime and family members of victims of crime who have come here today to put a face on an issue that should send a shiver up the spine of every Connecticut resident who cares about the state of Connecticut keeping faith with victims of crime. Last year, when the state Senate passed the early release bill on May 27th, I stood up and said, how can we in good conscience break a promise that was made to victims of crime by judges, by prosecutors, by victims advocates at the time of sentencing? How can we pass a law that with the stroke of a pen will upend the basis upon which people agreed to plea bargains? People went home after a victim was sentenced with the peace of mind that a judge had told them, that a prosecutor had told them, that a victim's advocate had told them there was no way the criminal would be released before a certain date. Now, victims are receiving letters in the mail from the Departments of Corrections saying, we regret to inform you that the promises that were made will not be kept. Ladies and gentlemen, I, for one, am going to make it my business in this legislative session to ensure that these promises are kept. We should all be offended that murderers, they may have copped a plea to manslaughter, but it sure sounds like murder to me. And serial rapists are getting the benefit of good time credits. Few people in Connecticut believe that serial rapists or murderers should benefit by an early release program. Interestingly, the commissioner of the Department of Corrections, when Governor Malloy was elected, he convened a working group and asked them for recommendations how he could strengthen the Department of Corrections. That working group, the commissioner herself, said if there was going to be an early release program, it should only be for low-risk, nonviolent offenders. It doesn't sound like any of the people that have come here today are the victims of crime committed by low-risk, nonviolent offenders. I have an opportunity in this legislative session. For better or for worse, it's always been my position that the state of Connecticut should not be in the business of taking life. Some people agree with me, others disagree. But I feel at least as strongly that the state of Connecticut should not be in the business of breaking its promises to victims of crime. And that is why, in this legislative session, as the legislature debates the death penalty, I'm going to make sure that at the same time that debate is conducted, we call to the fore what all of you are experiencing because of the lie that we passed last May. And I want all of you to contact your state senators, your state representatives, and impress upon them why it is the state can only have a clean conscience if we repeal this law and restore faith to the individuals who look to the system to protect them. So with that said, I'm happy to turn it over to any of you. Michelle, would you like the mic for a minute? Or?
Just a moment.
Sure. And then take questions.
I just want to thank Senator Roraback for bringing this issue up to the forefront. It's been the first opportunity that crime victims, and every single victim here has testified about a violent crime. It's the first opportunity that a crime victim has been able to voice their opinion, their thoughts about these risk reduction credits. And I think one of the hardest things for the victims are the individuals who are getting the retroactive risk reduction credits. So retroactive back to April 1st, 2006. And so I just appreciate the opportunity for these victims to have a voice. I just need to be clear about the death penalty. The OVA has no opinion on the death penalty because crime victims aren't united. We do have an opinion about the risk reductions as crime victims in the state have been provided constitutional rights, including the right to fairness and respect. And if you've heard the stories today, I think that unfortunately the state has veered from that promise. Thank you.
And I don't know if anyone has any questions of myself or Michelle or any of the victims who spoke more eloquently than any elected official could ever do on the subject.
On your linking your opposition to the death penalty and the repeal or the limitation of these risk reduction credits, what would you say to people that say that this might be a political move on your part? You're running for Congress. You have been on record as an opponent of the death penalty, and one of your opponents has been criticizing you on that score, and now you're linking your continued support for repealing the death penalty to either repeal or changes to this risk reduction credit. How do you answer those?
Well, first, Paul, I would answer that by inviting anyone who might hold that opinion to bear witness to the stories that have been told today. I've always been opposed to the death penalty. My opinion on that has not changed. I am equally opposed to the state lying to victims of crime. And I have very few opportunities as a state senator to be able to call the attention of the public and the press to what transpired last May when we broke faith, not just with the individuals behind me, but with each and every victim of crime who was made a promise by a judge, a prosecutor, a victim's advocate. Were it not for a debate about the death penalty, I would not be able to shine the light as brightly and as intensely on what I believe is our moral imperative to reverse the early release program, applied retroactively to violent offenders, so that the people who stand behind me can perhaps have their faith restored, that judges and prosecutors don't lie to victims of crime at the time of sentencing.
There were a number of proposals last year put forward by Republicans to do some of the very things you're talking about doing, and they were rejected, and this program was enacted. Do you have any indication, any faith that that changes will be made?
Paul, I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't have invited these individuals to take time off from work to travel to the Capitol if I didn't think the legislature would listen and react. How can you hear the stories that have been told and not believe that the state has perpetrated a wrong on each and every one of these individuals? I'm going to do the very best I can and call as much attention as I can to their plight. And I hope this is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue, although I will say it distresses me to think that the state is saving money by releasing violent criminals early, that there's a budget benefit for the state of Connecticut. Shame on us if we think saving money is a justification for breaking our promises. You know, Commissioner Lance said this should be done for low-risk, non-violent offenders, and instead it's being applied to virtually everybody.
So, publicity about this issue to get the public involved. I mean, there's no bill pending, right?
No, the point, Daniela, is to repeal the early release program. And the only way that's going to happen is if the public demands that it be repealed. If the public reaches out to their legislators, to their state senators and their state representatives and say, this should not stand. This is my opportunity to bring attention to this issue. I do so in the belief we can repeal the early release program if enough people learn about what it does. How many people in the state of Connecticut understand what happened? Unless you're a victim of crime, who knew that the judge told you one thing and then you're getting a letter saying, forget what the judge told you? This story needs to be told. People need to understand what we did, and collectively we have to work to reverse it.
But would this be like an amendment on some other bill, and there's no bill?
No, it's going to be an amendment on the death penalty bill, because that's the bill which the public is paying attention to. And I want the public to pay at least as much attention to this issue as they are to the death penalty. thank you all for being here. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. About how we can work together to try to, I'm not going away on this issue, and you make it very clear. No, it's not something that we can see out. It's something that walking the streets. I'm not sure we're all who live. Very strongly that the state shouldn't lie. So I'm connecting my position on the death penalty to this because it's the only chance I get for people to pay attention. Otherwise, people don't pay attention. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm very glad you're here. We will definitely keep you posted. I'll be offering an amendment when the Judiciary Committee votes on the death penalty. I'll be offering this amendment, and then if it comes before the state Senate and the state House, I'll be doing the same thing at that time.
Do you think that he'll be successful?
I do. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think we can convince people that this is the wrong thing to do, particularly when it comes to violent offenders. I mean, the commissioner herself said low risk, non-violent, and we're fine. And I don't think it should be retroactive either. So that's.
Senator, what would be considered a mandate for the legislature to be convinced that it needs to be repealed? I mean, how much of a voice would it take? What do they need for evidence?
And you know, Merritt and Michelle, they have a database with lots and lots of people who couldn't be here today. I mean, you got called on Friday,
Yeah, we
here
have,
today.
this is how many people came after just calling on Friday.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot more people.
So and everyone, I don't know where you live, but you should know your state representative, you should know your state senator, you should be educating them the way you educated me, and tell them that I'm going to be leading this effort and I want them to support me. And if they don't, they have to be answerable to you. So you've got Representative Smith and Senator McLaughlin in New Fairfield.
I'm in Hartford.
You're in Hartford. I don't know which. There's a lot of state reps. It's either Senator Coleman or yeah. You guys are in Ellington. You probably have Representative Sawyer, maybe Pam, or sorry, I can only represent Litchfield County. So that's my.
Tony Guglielmo.
And Tony Guglielmo. Yep. Tony will be.
Personally got his phone number, call him.
No, Tony will support.
Is a family friend, so we got Penny Bacchiano.
And you live in Stratford.
Kevin
Kelly will be good, and Laura Hoyter as well.
Yes.
She should be good.
First, I want to thank you for helping us out.
You're very welcome.
It's like hitting our head against the wall at times.
No, I can appreciate, you know, we did this in the dark at night. We did this late at night. No one talked about this. No one asked you what your opinion was, right? Did anyone write you a letter saying, we want to know this is going to affect you?
I'm pretty surprised in the newspaper.
It wasn't even in the newspaper. Right. And then all of a sudden, so the first you might learn about is you get a letter from the Department of Revenue saying, by the way, the deal has changed.
And also when I got that letter, and I called the OC, that supervisor on that
Yep.
letter, they said, don't worry about it, you'll CCD notice.
They want.
It's all inclusive.
No, I understand, but I mean, for non-violent offenders, the thinking is that it's good to get people to educational programs and things like that. I mean, they want inmates to come out of prison.
Then when they did this last one, wasn't there?
That's a good question. You and I have the same question, and I'm going to try to get some answers. You're welcome. Hey, sir. Troy.
Talk to Michael Waller about this one after we spoke.
Yes.
He said that legally the state, there's no way to take these credits back.
I don't believe him. He and I disagree on that.
Yeah.
And we will, the only way to find out is by repealing this bill. If the state could break its word to these victims, I think keeping faith with the victims is much more important than keeping faith with the convicts. And you know, Mike Waller says, well, the courts want to protect the rights of convicts to get their good time credits. I'm banking on the courts protecting the rights of victims by restoring the promise that was made initially. So I understand that this might be tested in court, but it would be my sincere hope that the judge would side with the victims and not the convicts.
Right, Senator, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes.
This group
Yep.
had asked to meet with you Friday.
And they've asked not to be on tape.
he'll go with the glasses. It makes me look what you think?
That's always good.
Or do you get glare? Can you get glare with that light? No?
To be on some panel talking about race.
Yeah.
Ready for the session.
Okay. Well, we want to talk about it. Fairly.
Oh, okay. It's got to get a new battery. All right, so while we're waiting. So, how is it? I mean, it's going for it, right?
Well, I mean, when you're in a five-way race, and the first level of is this chasing of 280 delegates, right, to 64. And we don't even know who they are yet. We have a general idea who they are because it's usually the same people.
Yeah, yeah.
But even then, you know, it's an interesting dance because a lot of these folks, this is the most important thing they do. And these are the ones that you need in the general election because they're the ones that get the vote out. So there's just a lot of crawling and cajoling and all that.
Yeah.
But it's okay because it's a good trial run to work on your message.
Right.
Get your organization. And, you know, there's so many people in it. You can go crazy trying to think of how to connect with that person. The best you could do is just be yourself and usually things work themselves out. But it's been a lot of meetings and receptions and one-on-ones and all that sort of courting. And then, you know, after that you get a primary, which is, again, something in a way a little bit easier because you're dealing with a bigger pool of people and you can use certain characteristics. But Lisa, Andrew, I think are the two more prominent candidates of the five in terms of name recognition, resources, how they, you know, what kind of built-in support they have, and some not so much. We'll see. I mean, things are going to start to really take off in a couple of weeks. Because in a couple of weeks, when the delegates get picked, the last like 10 days of the month. So that's when we know who the voters are, at least for the conventions. So that'll be the fun part.
And then, just before we start,
Yeah,
so
primary.
then that's when you'll make contact with them, like once you get them.
Well, officially, yeah. I mean, if any luck, all of the people we've been talking to have been town committee people and also people from the last convention. Usually it's, you know, 75-80%. Yeah, as it should be. So.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I guess if you could talk, I mean, I guess you don't probably buy that.
But I'm working on it. We're going that route.
Well, I think the issue of victims' rights is, you know, we applaud Senator Roraback for that, bringing attention to it, but the simple matter is that you can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, you're either for the death penalty or not, and to try and tie the death penalty to another issue really misses the point. Lisa Wilson-Foley believes that the death penalty is about justice, but it doesn't need to be repealed. If anything, we need to sort of strengthen it so you can apply it to many of these heinous criminals that guilt is beyond question. So today, I think, is sort of an effort to take the spotlight off that. Certainly, we support, Lisa would support any effort to tighten up the early release program. But I think it's a little bit of a playful diversion here at a time where we should really be talking about the economy and moving the country forward.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess he could say, I'm against the death penalty, and for those prisoners who are in prison and who are going to be serving time, this is a way, I mean, he's arguing that's a way to make
Well, he made an argument for the death penalty, even though he's against it. He talked about murderers being murderers aren't let out early. He did say that. I don't know many murderers that get out early, although there are circumstances. But there is one way to make sure that certain people don't get out, and that's to impose the death penalty, which Lisa fully believes in. The issue of early release for criminals, you know, this issue was around last year. The Office of Victim Advocate was cut. I don't remember hearing any objection back then by Senator Roraback. I'm sure he feels the same way as we do, that we need to put more money into that to protect victims' rights. But the issue here is, are you for the death penalty or are you not? And unfortunately, I think Senator Roraback is saying that, well, I'm sort of against it unless things change. And I think on a principle issue like that, it's pretty clear that Lisa Wilson-Foley is for the death penalty, and Senator Roraback is not. But even though he claims it's a principle, he seems to be using it as a bargaining chip. And that's, I don't think, fair to the people out there that want justice.
Thank you.
All right. Did you get all that?